People hear, oh, there we go. There comes the microphone. I didn't think it was on. I'm sure everyone's out there enjoying ice cream. But as he said, I'm Chelsea Blasko. I am here to talk to you about how we've run a sustainable business for 15 years. As Lyrica said, DevGAMM's been around 15 years. I had no idea. We both started in 2008. So a little bit, who am I? This is me, you can see. And this is my co-CEO, Adam Boyes. He's been here to give a talk at DevGAMM before, probably wearing some fancy sneakers and dancing around the stage a little more than I will. I have to say they have this delightful note to remind us we're awesome as a speaker back here, and I really appreciate that. This is just like the first speaker, it's my first solo speech since before the pandemic that wasn't virtual. So if you want to know a little bit about how we split up our duties, basically Adam works a lot externally with partners. He's the escalation point, he's the negotiator, and then I really work internally focused on our people and our policies. And I've been in games for about 18 years, almost 20. I started at EA Chicago. It went out of business 2 years in, unfortunately. But I worked on a project called DevGAMM Icon as a production coordinator originally. And then I later worked as a producer on some Tony Hawk products. Mostly no one really wanted peripherals anymore at that point, but it was pretty fun to get an idea how to work with hardware as well as software development. And then about 13 years ago, I came to Iron Galaxy Studios, and I have held a lot of roles at Iron Galaxy since the beginning of my career. I was a senior producer, a production director, I was game director on Killer Instinct, and all of that before I kind of now do more managerial things. And I've always just worn a lot of different hats in my career and never been afraid to just jump in, pick up a shovel. And you can find me if you're interested later. I don't really do much Twitter anymore, but on LinkedIn or Instagram. So a little bit about Iron Galaxy Studios. As I said, we were started in 2008, same year as DevGAMM, by Dave Lang. Here's our founder. So we've been around 15 years. Dave had been a tech director at Midway, and he had been laid off a few times in his career before. So he really saw the writing on the wall that Midway was not going to be around that much longer and decided to leave and start his own company out of his basement in the suburbs of Chicago. And at the beginning, we were primarily a tech house. And Dave has always said, I started out fixing Unreal basically for PS3, and I could have gone to Epic and fixed it one time for them, or I could go to every other developer and fix it 100 times and get paid that 100 times. So what was the better deal? Hopefully it was starting Iron Galaxy, right? And that was really the kernel that became who we are now. That's a little picture of our Chicago studio, our little break room there. So I came into the company as one of the first employees. Dave almost fell off the roof when we did this shot, so that was worth it. Adam pre-beard here, if you can't recognize that guy. But I was the 13th employee. I actually started the same day as our other, I was one of the first two women. We started the same day. The other was a programmer. I was the second non-programmer. We had a creative director. I was from the first cohort of people that Dave, the founder, didn't know, I'd never worked at Midway. So I was kind of coming in brand new. And I really kind of thought, oh, I'm taking this step back. I'm going from working on these AAA titles as a primary developer to working on work-for-hire stuff. What the heck am I doing? Turned out to be a pretty great idea, though. So we are located in Chicago. That's where we started. We have a second office in Orlando, third office in Nashville, Tennessee that we opened last year. And then we also are going to have an Austin location starting next year. So we've always done some distributed development as well. So moving on a little bit to what I'm here to talk about. And even though I have notes on the board, I have my paper because I'm kind of a Luddite that way. So you'll see me flipping that around. But when I got started, we were already working on at least 3 projects at a time. We were also working on You Don't Know Jack, but I don't know exactly what timeline that was in. But I was managing all 3 of these projects. And this, like I mentioned, was a new dynamic for me because I had to split my thoughts between multiple schedules. There were different processes. There were different teams on the projects. And like I said before, I worked as the lead developer, and now we're offering services to multiple partners. And so there were different kinds of cultures, different schedules, different expectations that all of these partners had. Since the early days of Iron Galaxy, though, we've always worked on more than one project at a time. Almost everyone who was in that initial cohort of like 12 folks had worked at studios before, like EA or Midway, where everything depended on one title, and it could do fine. Like Def Jam Icon did fine, but it didn't save our studio. We still all got laid off. So that was not that much fun. Many of us had gone through that. And so Dave's really wanted to create something with stability as its pillar. And he wanted to not only do that for that initial group of friends that he convinced to join him, but we want to continue to do that for all of our employees in general. And make a place where people can work together and not have to worry about finding a new job because your studio went bust. So that's, at least we've managed to do that for 15 years. Hopefully we can still do that as well. So as Iron Galaxy has grown a lot, we started at, like I said, when I started, we were working on about 3 projects at once. Often we'd work on about 7 to 12 projects. I think 14 was about the most we had going at any one time. And now we tend to work on, and this is actually a little behind, we have a few more employees now, but we tend to work on more like 6 to 8 projects at a time, even though our staff numbers have increased about 20 times over, going from the 13, 14 people to about 275 people over the span of 13 years. And you might be thinking that this sounds backwards. How do you have more people and fewer projects? But as we started to get more respect for the work we were doing and a good reputation with our partners and clients, the scope of the opportunities we received really went up. And so we needed more people on each project. And so then we had fewer projects with the larger teams, bigger mixes of resources. So to help service the partner needs and maintain stability, we also opened the Orlando studio in 2012. And that year, we went from 33 employees to 50 employees pretty much overnight, because we got 18 people. Everyone we made an offer to actually started on day one at that Orlando studio. And so in order to really make sure that we could seed the culture there were 3 of us, myself, Dan Coleman, who is now our product developer, and our creative director, Chad. We were down there like 1 week out of the month, every month for at least a year, making sure that we were there with all the new people so they felt really included, that they were really a part of Iron Galaxy, not this like little brother offshoot or something. But it did also add this complication. Now we have a second location. It's in a slightly different time zone. They have different cultural expectations. I mean, it's not another country, but Florida is pretty different than Illinois, if you know anything about U.S., how the U.S. is. So, and that year was the first year that we hired more artists too, and kind of took a chance there. We had about 3 artists. We went up to about 11 that year. And for some perspective, we had 26 programmers at that time. We've really always tried to maintain a higher ratio of programmers. Mostly for us, it's because we have a great reputation in that area, and they are always in constant demand, especially in 2012. That was what people were coming to us for, and so it was easier to place them, easier to keep that stability. And currently in 2023, we still have 32% of our overall employees are programmers. And that remains our strategy through our hiring forecasts and our planning. That's what we try to keep alive to kind of balance things out for us. So a lot goes into how we allocate resources and balance things. When Iron Galaxy started, as I'm sure some of you have experienced in your time too, we really had to kind of take any projects that were around because we needed to keep the lights on, we needed to keep people paid. Sometimes we didn't have a lot of choice, right? But as we continued to prove ourselves and we started to get a better reputation, we were able to more strategically stack opportunities and ask ourselves, what are we getting out of accepting this particular project? You know, we could start to ask ourselves questions. Are we going to gain a new competency? Are we going to forge a new relationship with a new and interesting partner? Are we going to further solidify an existing relationship? Are we able to get higher rates than we normally do? You know, are we able to place a combination of resources, programmers, artists, designers, all at one time? Because that's really advantageous for us. And then what is the timeline of the project? You know, can the relationship go on for a long time? Another question we always ask ourselves that's really important to us is, if we take this project with this partner, will we lock up more than 30% of our resources? We never want to do that because we figure if it all goes bust. Like one time we did have a company that was a client of ours go bust. It's not a secret that Telltale is no longer around. And there went all that work, right? So we want to be able to place those people on projects as quickly as possible and not endanger our stability. But we ask ourselves these questions, and you might have different priorities than we do, so you might have different questions you want to ask yourselves when deciding what projects to take, but those are some of the things we ask ourselves. So, like I said, we worked on these kind of stacks of partnerships and projects that would lead to bigger and bigger opportunities over time. And one of these stacks, if you will, started with a relationship we had with Microsoft. And it started even before I joined Iron Galaxy, but we were working on creating and helping with some connected venture titles at that time. And we'd also developed a relationship with Capcom around that same time. And so we started working on Street Fighter III Third Strike Online Edition. Excuse me, there's lots of words there. And we remastered that title. We added challenges, daily challenges, which back in 2011 was actually kind of novel. Nowadays, that's in everything. But when we worked on Street Fighter, a lot of us were fans of fighting games, and so we really knew how important it was to keep true to the franchise as fans ourselves, and to make sure that we were even leaving bugs in that perhaps the audience expected, and sticking with the canon. I unfortunately created the most hated DLC that came out. I got a little chance to code, and I made color packs, and apparently pinkies for Ryu are just not really the thing that people were looking for. But despite all that, the title itself is still a respected part of the Street Fighter franchise. So with kind of those stacks of competencies together, we were able then to work on and release a game called Racketeer in 2012. And this was our take kind of on a 3D physics-based Angry Birds style game. It was Connect. I got to be at E3 one year. I could actually walk better than I demoed for like 16 hours. Dave, our founder, had said, oh, sure, he would be there to help. He was there about 1 hour of the entire time. So I was just like a moving smile by the end of that experience. But it was still pretty fun. It's always, I'm sure the people out there showing off their games are getting a lot of satisfaction as well. So we got the chance to make our own title because of our experience on Connect Adventures and because we had a record of accomplishment of competently completing milestones for other partners. We also understood that Microsoft was really looking for more Connect titles, and we were really happy to oblige them on that at the time. So on Racketeer, we hired a lot more we hired one designer, actually. We went up to 11 artists, we hired a QA person, and then we did a lot of external contracting for all the other resources. I was even in a little commercial over there, cheesing it up, playing the game. And this time was the first time that we had ever used a large outsourcing house to contract some of our items. So we realized at some point we'd need to make a lot of compromises in order to get the game done. We didn't really have experience communicating with external outsourcing. And so now, over time, we've really streamlined that approach, and we've become more reliant on outsourcing, especially with our last title. So now we have internal roles that are specifically dedicated to communicating with our outsourcers, making sure things are done on time and on budget, making sure that they're getting consistent feedback. Yeah, Racketeer didn't work out exactly as we had envisioned. Dave likes to joke that it wrecked his career, although it really didn't. But it was still a Summer of Arcade title, which we were proud of, and it continued to build our relationship with Microsoft. And we got to work on a really hot piece of hardware called the Windows Phone 8 after that. So that was pretty amazing. Shortly thereafter, we started working on Dive Kick, which is a 2D fighting game, and it really distills the fighting game strategy down to the fundamentals of just dive and kick. Had only 2 controls, 2 buttons. We were able to put our creative chops to work, and so we cautiously hired a few more artists. We went from about 11 to 14 artists that year. We were still using some contracted folks to help us. That time it was Laksha. And Dive Kick taught us really how hard it is to publish your own product. We were doing everything pretty DIY, but we really learned how to run a game from concept to fruition here. And I wish that we had put out the 2-button controller. Some people tried to emulate this like a Donkey Kong bongo controls, but it was really pretty fun and visceral, and we didn't put it out, which I think was probably a mistake. But we were still really operating very DIY at this point in 2013. We built the demo stations all by ourselves in one of the folks' garages. We drove the equipment around. We didn't understand that you needed special permits, or sometimes I kind of knew you needed to be union to have a lift gate and this kind of stuff. We were still pretty small. We had a budget of under $500K for this title. It was like close to 400 by the time we were all done with everything, the marketing, the travel, all of that kind of stuff. And even though the Dive Kick sales weren't astronomical, the game was well received. It was rated 9 out of 10 on Steam. And we started at that point to be known not just to other video game developers who needed our help, but also to a core group of indie fans. So as we continued to stack things together, right, This combination of our fighting game background, the success of Street Fighter III and Dive Kick, and our relationship with Microsoft really led to our being chosen to take over the Killer Instinct franchise from Double Helix when they got acquired by Amazon. We made the decision then to grow the size of our studio team 50%, which was pretty big and pretty scary, in order to really take on Killer Instinct and still have that balance of work-for-hire projects that I was talking about. So we went in 2014 from 64 employees to about 95 employees. And I remember I was walking to lunch, I think to Chipotle, and Dave, again, our founder, called me. This was even before Adam was there. He was like, "What do you think if we hire all these people? It's so scary." And I said, "You know what, we should go for it." Even though it sounds risky and maybe counterintuitive to grow, we needed to grow so that we could not only work on Killer Instinct, which was going to take a lot of folks, but to also stay diversified, not have all of our eggs in one basket, so that we could really maintain that stability that I'm talking about. And we also decided around that time that going into the future, we really wanted to try to focus on 50% work for hire, 50% of our own creative IP or IP like this, not ours, but we were doing all the creative work on it. And that's not always rung true. Sometimes 60-40, sometimes less. Right now, less for sure. But that was kind of what we were shooting for. And one of the ways I think that we are able to achieve this and able to maintain this stability is really the idea of not just stacking products and what we do externally, but our people-first value and culture. I really think how we decide what people work on, living to our values, really resonates with our folks. And so when we're trying to decide what someone in the studio, what any person is going to work on, we really make sure that we understand what they're interested in. We want to understand what type of skills they want to build. We have a role preference sheet, which I'll show later, that we have people fill out to help us understand some of this. We have a lot of growth and feedback conversations. We do feedback every other week, written feedback every week, and then a meeting every other week. And we also obviously have to balance the business needs. So not just what do you want to do, but also what does the business need you to do at any one time. And one of the ways we've been able to achieve this, I really think, is by hiring generalists over specialists, because we're all a team. I mean, one person can make a game, and and that works. My son does that. He sits in the basement and makes games by himself all day, doing a little visual scripting. But generally, games are a really collaborative endeavor. And so we view every project as equally important. Doesn't matter if it's that 4-person firefighting team, doesn't matter if it's our 65-person creative project, we're all a team. And everyone's work is important to the stability of the company and contributes to everyone's livelihood. We really believe in that idea of picking up a shovel, like I said before. And that's, again, one of the reasons we've really hired generalists. We know that we need to be able to plug people into different places depending on our clients' needs, right? So, but then Rumbleverse kind of changed some of that. We started to do some more specialization. We took a chance during Rumbleverse to hire things like monetization, community management, some people who understood user experience, user research, and we allowed some of our designers to pursue more specialization than they had ever done before. We still expect, though, that people kind of have a major and minor skill, if you will. Someone might specialize in online, but then they're still really good at UI or gameplay, because we really, like I said, need people to plug into many different areas of projects and code and really have a diverse set of skills and a real willingness to learn in order to make that work, and a flexibility, a willingness to be flexible. We're not going to be just kind of working on the same type of projects or in the same code forever like you might do at some other studios, right? And that flexibility of people makes it easier for us to place people on projects and find good homes for them. So we want people also to be able to explore different kinds of work. We have a lot of different types of roles, different levels of responsibilities, and we are always we're always trying to figure out where people fit best. Someone might think, oh, I need to be able to manage all of the art on one project because that would be better for my career. But we'd much rather that person do really awesome just managing the environment art than do kind of it managing all of the art on the project. And we want to realize that that's not a demotion. That's not, that's not anything to be worried about. Here's that role preference sheet I was talking about. But we just want people to really flourish where they are. We have role names and titles, which is a little different than some studios, I think, too. The role names really tell what you're doing on any project in particular, and the titles are more what competencies have you developed over your career and where are you there. We see managers who sometimes want to go back and be individual contributors for a while, and we embrace that. We allow space for them to be really awesome at that as well. So basically, our internal project management practices are decided by the size and complexity of a project, and they're generally a hybrid of waterfall and agile methodologies. We take our continuous improvement really seriously, and we reassess our methods more than once during a project, for sure. So it's really important to realize when something isn't working and be able to let it go. We had a pod system on Rumbleverse, too. It worked for some teams. It didn't work for others. And so we had to kind of reevaluate and ask ourselves, is it not working because we didn't explain it? Is it not working because it wasn't a good idea? Does it not have good leadership? And those were some of the questions we asked ourselves. We also use this tool called 15.5, and I've talked about it so much over the years that they really, I think, should give me a kickback. But it really has worked out quite well for us. And so we're able to give people structured feedback every 2 weeks in a one-on-one. We're also able to get feedback from employees and understand their pulse every week. And we can get data that shows us how people have felt over a duration. If we see that someone has just been rating themselves a 1 for weeks on end, we can dive into that. But we also understand that a human touch is important. Just having the tool by itself is not going to do enough. We invest not only in managers and department heads, but we also have this team called the Employee Success Team. And they constantly are looking at the data, both qualitative and quantitative, that our employees provide, that our managers provide. And they're looking at all the feedback conversations, the goals, the tasking, and they're helping us keep track of that employee satisfaction, how well employees are doing, just what's the overall vibe, is there something we need to dive into? And we take each part of the equation really seriously. So like I was saying before in the role preference sheet too, we have people self-identify if they want to be a manager. I know that this is getting more prevalent in games. We don't just have the best animator become the animation director or something. We make sure that people actually want to do that, that people have that EQ or that emotional maturity, those soft skills in order to be able to be a manager as well. So that we know people often leave their job not because of the work that they're doing, but because their manager sucks. And so we want to try to alleviate that. And we also want to give our managers a break to go back to doing hands-on keyboard work sometimes. to keep their skills sharp and so they don't burn out. So we look to train our managers, check in with them quarterly, and we think that it's also important to have these people outside of the discipline who can check in on you and make sure that you're doing okay and give you feedback as well. But regardless of the project type, we really try to motivate our employees by offering that continued learning, growth, and a real community atmosphere. We see each employee as a person, not just a cell in a spreadsheet. And when you see the deployment sheet, they have to be cells sometimes for just organizational purposes, but that's not how we think of people. We don't want to lose sight of people's aspirations and their humanity. That was really important to keep people engaged during COVID and things too. So around early 2014, we started using the deployment sheet, and this is a snapshot from it, with the code names of different projects. They're all color-coded. And then it would be people's names along the side so that we could see, what people were going to work on at any different time. We understand, too, that most of our employees choose us because we do offer different experiences. You're not going to be working on the same project for 5, 10, 15 years at our studio. That's something different that we offer. And so we also want to make sure that we allow people that room to grow, that room to try new things, and that we make sure that our partners are allowing for that too. When partners want to lock names in, we really push back against that, partially because we know better who's the best resource for anything. We know what our people can do, and also because we know sometimes even if you really love an employee, they start to get kind of tired of that work, and it's good to allow them to do something else for a while, sharpen some skills, get some new experiences, and even if they come back to that project, right, they're going to do a little better in the long run on it. So when we work with partners on co-dev projects, we generally plug directly into their revision management tools too, and their production processes. We don't try to push our style on to our partners. Sometimes a partner ships us even computers they want us to use. People have 2 different computers because we have to be on 2 different networks. We try to be as adaptable to the security and the processes of our partners as possible. We know that keeping our partners' IP secrets is paramount to the stability of our company, and so we really take that very seriously. We don't take seriously, though, if our partner is treating our people poorly. Then we definitely have conversations about that. And that, luckily, has only happened a couple times in our history. But we make sure to honor any reasonable requests that our partners have and to remind our employees how important it is to keep these IP secrets, right? There are a myriad of ways a project can look with a partner. But like I said, we might keep tasks in our own Jira. They might have bugs in their database. We might have task lists in Excel. Just all depends on how a partner is comfortable working. And there are oftentimes, too, when we just plug our folks directly into a partner's team, and sometimes they even manage those folks as well. So we really try to be as accommodating as possible to the way every partner likes to work. And we really see that our partners really appreciate that. And we've been able to then learn from our partners' successes and failures as well when we do our own work. One of the areas we do struggle is in deployment flow. When you saw on that deployment sheet, it's not like usually a project just ends Friday and then suddenly Monday there's a new project that starts and it's like, woo, you go directly from one to the other. And that's something we try to be upfront with employees around and try to find creative work for them in between, whether that's like working on a project in UE5 or doing a game jam or learning to work together in a different way or putting together a pitch or an RFP. We really try to keep people busy because employee morale can drop if someone doesn't think the work they're doing is important. At first we thought, oh, you don't have anything, you should enjoy that. You don't have anything really to do. Well, people didn't. So we really had to understand that in-between work was really crucial too. And as part of the leadership, I really advocate that these projects get the same level of accolades that our other projects receive, that they get that time at at the company meetings, and the employees get to show them off. It's really important to create space for that as well and celebrate them at the company events. So one of the pitfalls of expanding and managing work for hire capabilities is really thinking that it will be easy. You need to be prepared to constantly reevaluate what you're doing and to have a process in place to measure that success or failure. Like I keep being slightly behind in my clicking here. You can't be afraid to try new things and know it will be hard and that not everything will work. That's just part of getting better. You have to understand how to balance overhead with paid employees so that you get the correct amount of support to your employees, but you don't price yourself out of the range of the customers that you're trying to get to. And having some partnerships yourself, if you do some outsourcing yourself, can give you an idea of the rates other people have for a little bit of comparison there. So all the methods I've spoken of lead to keeping our employees engaged as we balance the various needs of partners, our business needs. We're never afraid to explore new ways of doing things. We pride ourselves on being someone who always listens, a studio that always listens and learns. We've adapted to different studio sizes. We recognize that some of the things that have worked before, they just won't continue to work. We do culture and values meetings to recognize that and talk about that. So you shouldn't be afraid to try a variety of methods as well in your own studios. And with that, I want to just say thank you. And I know my time was counting down. It was making me only slightly nervous. But if anyone has any questions, I'd be really happy to take them.
Thank you for your speech. You did great.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, there is a microphone stand. You can come and ask something. Oh, okay.
Hello. Thanks for your presentation. Sometimes it seems that all the stuff you were talking about, all these kind of things, in other businesses, it was for years and years. And sometimes it seems that gaming industry is a little bit lagging behind. Let's say overtime was okay 5 to 7 years ago. Why do you think the change comes slowly to the industry?
I think at least from my experience in the industry, I think sometimes we don't have the humility to realize that, like I said, what we have done isn't going to work going forward, and that people won't necessarily tolerate the same type of experience as before. We also have, though, hopefully now, people like myself who've been in the industry 20 years, whatever. We're not all just 20-year-olds. We've been able to see the mistakes that have been made, and hopefully we're able to learn from those. And now that we're in some kind of positions of authority, make better decisions. I think also something I see with my managers is we're going. We're a very milestone-based type of culture. And we don't take as much time to look strategically or big picture or look outside of our industry for how people are doing things. And so I say even spend 15 minutes a week doing something completely unrelated so that you learn something and get a different perspective that you can apply.
Any other questions?
Hi. When talking about remote employees, are there sort of any positions that are kind of that you shy away from having remote?
Yeah, so our model is hybrid. So we have the different locations. We do distributed work, but we're not fully remote. We have people coming to the office twice a week in any of the different locations, and people travel across the locations as well to meet each other. We find overall, it's not just about the work that we do that keep our employees wanting to work for Iron Galaxy. They also want to have friends. And so we really want to encourage that. I don't know if there's nothing you could absolutely never do remote. I wouldn't say that, but we find that when we've had people who are solely remote, they just didn't stay with us. They didn't build those same kind of connections to the people on their teams. And so it was a lot more easy for them to leave. But I think you can do a lot of the work remote. It's really more about the collaboration and the connections that is why we want to see people coming together in person.
More questions? Okay, let me ask a few. You mentioned that you have like 50% of your team working on the work for hire and on your own projects. But how strongly they're separated from the project? Or some people work on both types of projects, or how it's work in your company?
Yeah, usually people are at this stage 100% deployed to whatever project they're on. So if they're on a creative project, they're 100% on that. If they're on a work for hire project, they're 100% on the work for hire project. But like I said, we don't necessarily keep people it wasn't as if everyone who started on day one on Rumbleverse was at the very end of Rumbleverse. They may have moved off to work on a work for hire project. Some other people may have cycled in. And that's something else we notice. Some of your folks might be great starters, and they're the people with the big ideas, and they're the people who can make the schedules, jump in. Then you have your closers, and you kind of know that about people, and so we move people around. But in our earlier days, we had people straddle a couple projects sometimes. We really don't do that much anymore.
So you don't push your team to work in one way or another? They just usually decide?
Yeah. Well, we have people, I feel like most of our people just want to solve problems, right? So whether they're working on our own IP or they're working on someone else's, and we get to work on really awesome partner IP. People just want to be busy solving problems and feeling like they're part of the team. We don't have a lot of that competition. It's not like, hey, you get the profits from this title. It all goes in the same pool. Everyone benefits. I know at Midway, it was like everyone wanted to be on the MK team because those folks would show up with their bonus Ferraris and no one else got that. We don't want any of that unhealthy competition. We want everyone's project is equally important.
You also mentioned some tools like 15.5,
Yeah.
managing tool. And as I understand, you didn't implement it long time ago. It's like some fresh
We've
tool
used
for you.
15.5 probably 7 years now.
7 years. The question was about, was it a challenge to push people to use it? Because sometimes people, I'm just doing my work and now you ask me to fill the forms, take the service and all this stuff. How hard is that for you?
Some people, yes, at the beginning, but we had a worse tool before. So moving over to 15.5, for the people who were already using the really crummy tool, it was like, yay. And then I even originally thought, God, I gotta fill this thing out every week. This is a lot. But if you just kind of get in the cadence, people see the results. People see that we actually do read it. We actually talk to people. There are high fives. You can give people compliments. And so I think people do it because they actually see that we pay attention to it. If we just had people fill it out and we never reacted or never brought up something that someone said or never made a change, sure, then I think they'd be a lot more ticked off about having to do it all the time.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Oh, one more. Okay. I think this is the last question because we're coming out of time.
There are usually a big creative difference when working on projects for hire and working on your own creative ones. I wonder, like, can you tell us a little bit about like your company's experience on how you manage expectations, or just you know, like employee expectations on how creative they can get with the project. What I mean is that when you're working for hire, you usually you know, have a product owner on the other side who's dictating what is allowed and what isn't, and usually you should just you know, focus on what the client needs, and then it's a you know, really big fun working on your own creative ones, because on your creative projects, because it's a lot more free. So can you tell us a bit about your experience with that issue?
Yeah, I would say, honestly, we're more used to the work for hire scenario. And we tend to get, you know, a fair amount of freedom as we gain trust and have gained a reputation with our partners, right? But ultimately, they're the clients, and we listen to them, and if they decide they don't want what we have offered them, it's their product. We do what they ask us to do, even if we don't think that that is necessarily the best way to go, but we have to have humility there. And on our own projects, I would say we still tend to overscope. We have to be careful about that, because this desire then to go fully pie in the sky kind of ideas, we can overscope a bit, and so that's one of the pitfalls that we get into. But it really is a like you have to, a different mindset. With Killer Instinct, it was nice because it was kind of in the middle. It was an established franchise, so there were certain tropes and things we had to follow, but we were adding new characters and new moves and new environments. And so that was kind of this like great mashup of the two. On Rumbleverse, it was, you know, completely ours, and so we had to be a lot more careful to rein it in and listen to the feedback of the players and things as if they were a client, to kind of take some of those practices and bring it to Rumbleverse. I hope that kind of answered your question.
Okay, thank you very much for your speech.
Thank you.